What got you interested in all of this?
Well, I'm the daughter of refugees. My parents came to this country in 1973. They were expelled by the dictator Idi Amin. They were two of 1,000 refugees that got status to come to this country because they were engineers. My father, though, had to work as a machinist in a plant. My mother sold cosmetics. And my dad, when I was very little, he would read me these little Reader's Digest books about Dr. King and Mahatma Gandhi. And there was something about hearing those stories when I was little about these change makers, these warriors, these people who were put on the earth to do something that stuck with me. And so I've always wanted to fight for people like my parents, vulnerable, poor, people who, others had counted out. And as we know, Dr. Phil, a lot of those are in our society and across the world are women and girls. I've always been moved by the plight of women and girls. It's always been the people that I've wanted to fight for.
Do you think that's changing in America at least, or do you think there's still that big gender difference in the way they're treated and the way they see themselves?
I thought it was changing, and then the pandemic hit, and women are in crisis. Dr. Phil, the CDC reported that the second subgroup besides young people that have the highest levels of anxiety and depression are moms. Moms don't break. But there's something about the past 2 years in the pandemic. There's something about our public policies. There's something about our structure that we have in our society that is really pushing mothers to the limit. And, one of the things I've really been reflecting on, is the fact that like we just think that in our country or in America in some ways that like motherhood, parenthood is a personal choice. And so you don't get anything from your government, your society, your neighbor, your friends, your
Right.
workplace. But like you don't have a functioning society, that has a declining birth rate. Family values, being at family is like such a core part of what it means to be an American. And I think we've lost a little bit of that.
I'm way older than you. So I've grown up through some different generations. And in the 50s, we were not a double income society to the degree we are now. I think now the statistics are high 70s, maybe
Yep.
even low 80s double income society, whereas in the 50s, it was maybe half that. So now we've got both parents working outside the home, bringing in income that the family relies on. And previously, families adjusted to living on one income, and the second income was what you fell back on if something happened.
Right.
Somebody got sick, or a job was lost, or unexpected things came up. Then that second partner would get a job and bridge the gap. But now we're a largely double income society, and 100% of those two incomes are being absorbed. So there's no cushion
Right.
there, but women are a vital part of the family's economic lifeline. That's really showing the pay gap, right? Because they're out
Yep.
there in the workplace, but working for less.
That's right. That's right. Women are not a nice to have in the workforce. They're a must have. But the problem is, Dr. Phil, we built workplaces on the fact that we've treated women as a nice to have. So, we have work days that are 9 to 5 and school days that are 8 to 3. Because back in, like you said, in the 50s, he was at work and she was at home and she could pick up the kids. Now it doesn't work that way. And so all of society is based on an outdated model that no longer exists. And who's picking up the slack? Women. And the pandemic really exposed this. So, like when schools shut down, a lot of families in America treat schools, I know my parents did, as daycare centers.
Of course.
And so when schools shut down and you still had to work, you had no system of care. And when we created this thing where you had to like log in your kid at Zoom, I have a kindergartner. I can't be like, hey Sean, log yourself on, see you later. No, I got to be right there with him while I'm trying to keep my job. And so when that happened, it was women that were doing that unpaid labor, that homeschooling, the cooking, the cleaning, the putting on your mask, making sure you wiped off everything, right? Just in case the virus, I mean, all of that while you were maintaining your full-time job. And nobody was looking at this saying, whoa, 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 we got to rethink this.
I can't cite the study, so I'll talk about this anecdotally, but there are studies out there to this, and if people can find them and send them to me, I'll appreciate it. But I recall a study from many years ago that looked at the number of steps, the number of activities that stay at home moms did compared to mothers working outside the home. And it wasn't totally isomorphic, but very close to the number of steps, the number of movements and activities that stay at home moms did compared to mothers working outside the home. And so these people that think, well, stay at home moms, they just kind of sit around on the couch and eat bonbons all day. Not true.
Nope.
What it amounts to is a working mom goes and does what she does. Then when she gets through with that, she has another full-time job that she does on top of the job that she leaves the home and does. So it's like 2 full-time jobs.
Yep.
When you said that the pandemic has shown them to be the second group that has been impacted by increases in anxiety, depression, stress, loneliness, even some learned helplessness creeping in there, that's absolutely borne out by the statistics. And I think it is because of this feeling of I'm now overwhelmed. I've got the financial pressure, jobs are lost, my children are showing emotional problems, regression, depression, anxiety. Here I'm trying to keep all of this together and can't do it. And so many of these women can't do their job working at home because it's a service job, just like a lot of men that drive a truck or they're working with their hands or whatever. They can't do it from home. They have to be on site to do it. So that creates tremendous anxiety.
That's right. And I think the thing that we told ourselves before, at least I certainly did, is he just doesn't know. I married one of the good ones. I made sure that I married someone who did the cooking, the cleaning, all that stuff, right? But then when we had a kid, when we had my first son, Sean, I took my maternity leave and he didn't. And then suddenly I knew where all the stuff was, right? And so my to-do list went like this and his shrunk. And it is the constant thing that we argue about, right? 1/3 of divorces are about the chores. But part of it was, I think for a lot of us, we told ourselves, well, our partners just don't know. They just don't know all the things that we do. And then we got locked in the house with them. And they saw us doing our laundry in between our Zoom meetings. They saw everything that we were doing and how much we were doing. The whole world did. Our president did.
Yes.
But no one said, oof, not just thank you. Thank you for saving our country. But also this isn't fair. This isn't right. We got to rethink this. And, the reality is that, if we know that we need women's labor for the economy, and that in order to do that, and that women are doing 2/3 of caregiving work, they're doing 2.5 jobs before they do their full-time job. We need to be thinking about what are the structures that we can put into place, that can actually support working women and working families, with this domestic work. So I think you always think about what are the silver linings of crises, and this is the silver lining of it, because the reality is nobody wants to have kids. Young women look at me and they're like, no, thank you. And as you know, a society that has a declining birth rate is a dying society.
Is that the reason you think? Do you think that's the reason there's a decline? How do you assess that?
I think it's all about the cost. I mean, think about it. I think about my parents, they were refugees. My mother couldn't afford the $50 a week for childcare. And so from the time that I was 10, I was a latchkey kid. My sister would pick me up at middle school. We would run home, lock the door, right? Because back then it's we were terrified someone's going to kidnap us.
Right.
I think about my mother and how she felt sitting at her work at 2:45, thinking about her babies running home by themselves. But the point is that so many families have always had to make these unconscionable choices. A story I talk about in my book, Pay Up, about a mom who had to go to work at a pizza parlor. She didn't have childcare. So she left her kids at home and she got put in jail for child endangerment. So, we don't give families slack, and the cost of childcare has just skyrocketed. In New York City, it used to be $15 for a babysitter. Now it's $25. So,
wow.
It's the largest cost center of, so many families. And so it is also an economic issue. You basically work to work and not work to live. And we got to restructure society so that we work to live and not work to work.
I've heard a lot of people talk to me about the fact that spending time with themselves has created a bit of an existential crisis. They've had some time to think, what is this really all about? I was doing all this stuff before that when I quit doing it, it seemed kind of silly that I took it so seriously.
Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, you see this with care work. And I read about this in my book, Pap. It's like, people always say to me, Rush, what do men think about your book? And I'm like, no, they're with me. They want to spend time with their kids too. You're the first time you had dads who like didn't do the 2-hour commute and took their son to school or had them watch, soccer. They became a part of the family. And they recognized that like that's good for reducing my diabetes and my heart attack levels and all of the it's healthy for me. And I feel alive. I feel present. So I do think that like we're going through this kind of existential crisis, like you said, in America in terms of like ending this kind of hustle culture that we have. Drive, work 80 hours a week, don't put your head up, don't have any joy. Don't spend time with your family or, read a book. And I think people are like, no, I don't want to live that way. I want to live differently. And it is really this resistance, towards in some ways what is like inherent, we think is inherent in a capitalist society, but that is at odds with living life. And I do think, especially now as this is like everything's opening up and you have to then set your own boundaries about how you want to interact and how you don't want to interact. That's a lot of permission to people and in giving them control back over their life is something that I think we should stop trying to fight.